I'm going to move in now to what I believe God has placed on my heart to share with you today. So if I could really title my message anything, I would title it Store Up and Build Up. I want to start off by just saying, how many of you, when you were younger, or maybe you are young right now, did you just kind of feel like you had your whole life planned out? Like you knew this is exactly how my life's going to go? Show of hands. Anybody felt like they were that way? Okay. So like maybe like half of you. All right. Well, I think that a lot of us were kind of programmed to plan. I remember at my daughter's kindergarten graduation, all the kindergartners had to say what they wanted to be when they grow up. And it was really cute because, sometimes you get the really outrageous things like, I want to be a, WWE wrestler, and, sometimes you get the serious ones like, I want to be a doctor. And it's always fun to look down the road and see if any of those actually happen or not. But it's funny how, from even a young age, we're programmed to start preparing and planning and setting these goals and this vision of, what is our life going to look like? And so when my husband and I got married, we were very young newlyweds. My husband was 24. I was about a couple months shy of my 21st birthday. And like all young newlyweds, we too felt like we have all of life planned out. We know exactly how everything's going to go, and we had this whole prescription of this is what life is going to be like. And at the time, he was working in sales, and he had this dream to one day become a full-time coach because he loves football and he grew up in football town. Me, on the other hand, I had this big dream to become a nurse practitioner. I was working full-time at a hospital and also going to nursing school. And so both of us had this concept of this big dream when it came to our careers and what we were going to do. But then we also knew we wanted to have this really big fancy house like the one that you see on the screen. And I had my must-haves where it's it needs to have a wraparound porch, and it needs to have a really big fireplace, and it needs to have a really big twisty staircase because I just love twisty staircases. And we thought maybe we'll have a picket fence, and then there'll be a little puppy in the yard, and we'll go on vacations every year, and we're going to drive really nice cars, of course. And then, of course, we also said, we wanted a family. Family was always part of the plan. We kind of had a family right away because my husband had a child from a previous relationship. So entering into marriage, I already had a stepson. But we always knew the plan was to expand our family as well. We would have children of our own as well. And so really the desire of our heart at this point in life was we just really want to have all the conveniences and the luxuries of the world, and we want to be able to give that to our kids as well. Not necessarily bad, goals and dreams, but that was, in our opinion, this is the definition of success. This is the epitome. If we could just achieve this is exactly what we want. So 3 years into marriage, life took one of its many unexpected turns, as life tends to do. And I found out that I was expecting for the first time. And of course I was excited. This was not bad news. I was thrilled to be becoming a mom. But at the time, because I was working full-time, going to school part-time, I wasn't finished with nursing school yet. It was taking me so much longer to go to school because I had to work. There's bills to pay, we had to eat, things like that. So work became a priority in that early, first couple years of marriage. And so I remember thinking, okay, this wasn't really exactly the plan. We had this plan, right? So we were first going to get married. I'll finish nursing school, become a nurse. We'll buy that beautiful house that we're dreaming of, get settled in there, and then we'd start a family. That was the prescription. And I remember initially feeling really overwhelmed. And I did something that was kind of not, like me at the time. I was very much a go-getter. Let's get things done. I was driven, task-oriented. And I remember just feeling this little nudge to just take the semester off school, which was, again, not like me at all because we're no, we've got a vision for the dream. We've got the big dream. We got to get this accomplished. And I just remember just feeling this notion, I just need to settle down and just get ready for this new life that's coming. So I am 3 months into my pregnancy, and it's the fall semester that I've taken off school, and I'm at work one day, and I worked on the orthopedic floor. So it was the floor where anybody recovering from like knee replacements, hip replacements, back surgery, it was incredibly intense and labor, intensive and very physically taxing. I'm doing lifting and stuff all day long. And one day I had an injury that scared me, my husband, and my doctor. I'm helping a patient back from the restroom back to her bed, and we're about halfway there. It's just me and this patient. She had double knee replacement, and as she's getting about halfway to the bed, all of a sudden I feel her start to wobble a little bit, and it's like one of those situations where you're like, oh no, she's gonna fall. And she starts to kind of lean back, and when she leaned back, her arm just flew and karate chopped me right in the stomach, really hard. And I remember in the moment feeling like this intense pain. And thankfully, I was able to secure her. She didn't fall back or anything. I got her back to the bed. But then about 30 minutes later, I just started feeling like that mild cramping and started bleeding a little bit. Thankfully, I'm in a hospital already, so I just ran right down to the emergency room to get checked out. Graciously, the Lord was looking out for me and my daughter. My daughter's name actually means God is gracious, and so it was amazing that he was looking out for us. She was perfectly fine. Everything ended up being fine. But because of this, having conversation with my doctor and my husband, my doctor is like, I don't know how comfortable I am with you doing all this heavy lifting, during your pregnancy. I think you might want to take it easy. So I'm just going to put you on a restriction. Don't lift any more than 10 pounds. So I go back to my boss, and I bring this news, and they're not really thrilled about that. So they're like, well, we can't really afford that kind of liability. We can't guarantee you're not going to lift more than 10 pounds. So then she said, well, I'm just going to have to probably place you on an early leave. And I later found out that what the hospital should have done was just move me to a desk job or something where I'm not doing all this lifting, but I was never offered anything like that. And God had other plans in mind. So I remember thinking, okay, I'm 3 months pregnant. I just took the semester off school. Now I'm on maternity leave now, apparently. What in the world am I going to do with my time? And I thought, I feel like I just, wasted a whole semester. I could have been, at least pressing on towards that goal. I thought we were just taking a pause. I've already, feel like there's been a detour in my plans, but now I feel like I'm in standstill traffic, and there's no movement happening. So I knew I have to do something to kind of keep myself busy. And so I decided, I'm like, all right, what hobbies can I do? What kind of new skill maybe could I learn? And I thought about, I said I wanted to get ready for the baby coming. And so I just started kind of, of course, doing the typical nesting things that moms do. But then I also decided, I'm like, I've never bothered to learn how to cook or anything. And, I liked when my mom cooked growing up. So I appreciated those home-cooked meals, and I'd like to give that to my kids. So let's go for it, So I watched tons of Food Network, and I'm writing down recipes, and I'm asking my mom, what's mince? What's mince mean? And stuff, all those terminologies and things, and started cooking and experimenting with different recipes, and turned out I really love cooking, and it became a passion of mine. And then the other thing I wanted to start doing too, though, I said, I've been just reading away in textbooks and filling my head with all this anatomy and physiology terminology and chemistry and all this stuff. I want to start, maybe kind of expanding my mind a little bit more, maybe dig into some topics about, what does it look like to be a godly mom and a godly woman? I mean, you don't really get a manual, but I'd like to maybe just hear from other women and see what does this look like? So I started just picking up some books at the bookstore. Books like A Mom After God's Own Heart and books like The Measure of a Woman. I just really dug in and just spent a lot of time reading. And I remember too thinking that the book that I really wanted to read the most, though, was the Word. Because I grew up in a Christian home. I had Christian parents. Both knew the Word really, really well. And it was starting to just really hit me that the spiritual development of my child was going to be very heavily dependent on me, and that I was going to be discipling a new baby who eventually is going to become an adult. And I felt like even though I was so, on task with nursing school and all those studies, I was really, really behind in my study of the Word. And so I started digging in to the Bible a little bit more, and I felt like God kind of just landed me in the book of Matthew. At the time, I grew up in church. Again, I memorized Bible verses like all my life, but at that point in my relationship with God, I felt like it was more like, yeah, we go to church on Sundays, and then it's just regular life then the rest of the week. And, our time with God, our relationship with God pretty much ends when that service ended on Sundays. So I didn't really, even though I'd memorized all these verses, I didn't really have like this really strong grasp of God's word. It never really meant a whole lot personally to me. And so I remember starting off in Matthew because I'm thinking, I'm not reading the Old Testament because like, what does that have to do with anything? And it felt so irrelevant. And now I love the Old Testament, but I started reading in the book of Matthew, and I got to chapter 6, and I felt like for the first time, God was actually speaking to me through the word. So Matthew chapter 6, verse 19 through 21, it says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Now, I knew this verse growing up. I remember reciting it to, my Sunday school teacher so I could get, my piece of candy and stuff for the week. And it wasn't until now, though, that it actually meant something to me. And I know the original context of the verse, Jesus is really talking about, how we view money and, making sure that, we're not serving money over serving God and things. But I remember just pausing and really meditating on those words. And I felt like God was just saying, I want you to make a different kind of investment. You've been really heavily invested in what your plan is for your life up until now. I really want you to start making an investment in your family by calling you to stay at home. Now, before I continue, I really wanted to be clear to make sure that you hear me when I say I'm not suggesting by any means that the Bible says that women have to stay at home when they become moms. It could be something that, you might think is what I'm trying to say. So I really wanted to make sure that you hear me when I say that's not the takeaway here. I believe that, you look at the Proverbs 31 woman, she was a wife and a mother, and she was a businesswoman. There is not a one-size-fits-all prescription for every mom what God calls you to do. But I know for me, what God was really doing was he wasn't changing the trajectory of my plans. He wanted to change the treasures of my heart. And he was giving me a heart that not just desired to invest in my children for that specific season during that time in that way of staying at home, but what he really was saying to me is, I really want you to just let go of whatever your plan was for your life, and I want to just shape your heart to desire what it is that I'm asking you to do. I want you to be obedient to me. I want you to follow me and listen to me. I want you to pursue the things of my kingdom and what I have for your life, and not your own plan. I knew it was God reshaping my desires because I suddenly, in that moment, I no longer had this desire to do all the things that I really had originally set out to do. And I just felt like this real peace about I am almost done with nursing school, but I don't need to finish. If God really wants me to stay at home, I'll stay at home. I talked to my husband about it, and he was immediately like, I would love for you to stay at home. That's great, And so God really gave me the joy and the peace in that decision as well, which was a huge blessing. But real quick, before I continue and kind of talk a little bit about, that journey and things, I have this short video that I wanted to play just because I wanted to give you an idea of a little snapshot about what my life was like during this season of being a stay-at-home mom. So go ahead and take a look.
Hey, babe, how was your day?
Well,
Oh, yeah. It was just a normal day.
How was your day?
Well, my mommy snuggled with me when I was scared. I love my baby sister so much. We laughed so hard that our bellies hurted. And Mommy gave us lots of kisses. We went for a fun ride. But the best part of the day. Me and Mommy had a food fight. And it was the best day ever.
I will say that the 7 years that God allowed me to stay at home with my kids was truly rich. And through those years, God gave me several other detours. He gave me a lot of divine destinations. He gave me lots of opportunities to trust in Him more and be obedient. Store up treasure in heaven. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So, moms, the first question that I would like to ask you today is, where are you storing treasure? And I don't know what season of life you're in. You might have adult children right now, and I'm going to say on behalf of someone who is an adult child, you never stop storing treasure for your kids. But God knows our hearts so well, doesn't He? And for me, I believe that what He wanted me to do was to just give up in order so that I could store up. And so I want to just talk briefly about how do we store up treasure in heaven. And the first point I wanted to bring up is that it begins with a heart that is heaven-bound. Colossians 3:1 says that since you have been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. God desires for us to truly be in tune with what matters most to Him. And I will say, as moms, we know that our children mean a great deal to us, and they mean a great deal to God. The Word says that children are a gift. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Children are not a distraction from more important work. They are the most important work." And as I said, this does not mean that moms are all called to stay at home. You might work outside the home. You might work within your home. You might be a stay-at-home mom. You might be an empty nester with grown children. You might be a grandmother. But what it does mean is that when you are investing in your children, whether they're little babies and you're changing diapers, or whether they're grown children calling you with their big problems that they're going through at the time, or whether you are the one that is taking care of your grandkids while your kids are at work and things, we are doing the work of the kingdom every time we are investing in our kids. And I always remember feeling like, it's not something that you don't get like a 401k stock, when you're investing in your kids, but it really reaps eternal dividends. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was, and this actually comes from one of the books that I read when I was in that season where I was doing all that reading, and it says to recognize that your home is a place of holy ground. One of those books that I read, one of the authors, Donna Otto, she wrote a chapter that said your home is holy ground. And she starts off the chapter by saying that when you step into your home, what is oftentimes the first thing that you do? And a lot of us, when we walk in the house, we're taking off our shoes. It's one of the first things that we do when we come in. And she said maybe it's because you want to spare the carpet, or maybe it's because you're just ready to get comfortable and you're just tired of wearing your heels or whatever you're wearing that day. But she compared it to the moment that Moses encountered God in the burning bush. And God was getting ready to commission Moses to go and lead a nation of people out of Egypt, not just to a new land and not just out of slavery, but into a covenant relationship with Him. And the first thing that God said to Moses was, remove your sandals, because the place that you're standing is holy ground. And I love the challenge and the comparison that she gave for moms, because she said when you come home and you step in from your long day of work, or your day where you've just been out running about running errands all day long, or whether you're going to your adult child's house to go watch your grandkids that day, when you take off your shoes, there's a symbolic sense that this is holy ground. This is not just the stomping grounds where we have endless piles of laundry and dishes and sticky fingers and all these things, but it is truly the place where we are nurturing and discipling and raising up the next generation of leaders who are going to be leading God's kingdom one day. Now, I could stay here all day long and talk about this, but I want to make sure that we have enough time to get into the second part of what I want to talk about today. So as I said in the beginning, that we are called as moms to store up and to build up. Now, in my early years as a mom, my days were filled with the moments of reading the Bible, reading other stories, trips to the park, blanket forts, all these fun moments in the day, playing dress up and having tea parties and all these things. And I remember, just spending hours in the morning teaching my kids, here's what a square looks like, and this is how you print your name, and this is how you say sorry when you've shoved your brother and you've hurt him. And then teaching, even the the fun practical moments of, no, the toilet's not a pool for your toys. And we don't ever want to flush the toys, down the toilet because bad things happen. But I remember thinking to myself, I felt like I was doing the definition of storing up in those seasons. But I had no idea just how relationally starved I was at the same time. You see, when I was growing up, I was a teenager and things, I was the oldest of a lot of my friends, and I got to experience everything first. So I was the first one with a cell phone, the first one with a job, the first one with a car, the first one to get married, and then I was the first one to have kids. And so when I stepped into motherhood, I was kind of alone in my circle with all my other core friends, and you could just kind of tell that they were not at all relating to me as being a new wife and a mom. And they would come over and they want to talk about their boyfriend that they're dating, or they're talking about, hey, are you free Saturday? Let's go out and stuff. And it was hard to relate to someone who now life is kind of being dictated by a feeding and napping schedule. And so slowly over time, a lot of those women just they faded out of my life a little bit, just because they couldn't relate to me anymore. And as much as God gave me a ton of joy to be with my kids, I loved being with my kids. And I didn't even realize it at first. It wasn't until God actually led us to Cleveland, I didn't realize how just emotionally and spiritually kind of thirsty I was to be able to have other moms who could relate to me. And so when we moved to Cleveland, my daughter started attending school, so she enrolled in kindergarten, and I remember getting this little note home from school that was advertising for this Moms in Prayer group. And even though I'm thinking, I don't know these women at all, and it's going to be super awkward to go and pray with women that you don't even know, I just felt like God was just nudging me to go. And so I remember they met every Friday morning for about an hour to an hour and a half, and I remember showing up there, and these women were in all different seasons of life. They had all different kinds of stories and backgrounds, and there was women that were single moms and women that had blended families like me, women who had little kids and adult kids. We had a couple grandmas that were in the group whose grandchildren were the ones that were in the school. And every week we got together, we dug into God's word. We prayed for one another and our children. We encouraged each other and built one another up. We cried together. We laughed together. We worshiped together. It was life-giving for me. I looked forward to those opportunities to be able to come together with them. And there were some days where we were there way past the time that we needed to be. Or we'd said, we need to keep the conversation going, but let's go take it over to Panera, and go get lunch and stuff. And they became people that would be checking in with me throughout the week. Hey, how you doing? Hey, did you ever find out about this? And how's this situation going? And hey, is your son feeling any better? You said he was sick the other day. Do you need anything? Can I bring you something? I mean, they just became like a little mom tribe. And it really just, again, it completely built me up personally, spiritually, everything. And, when I think about Moses, and we talked a little bit about Moses and how, God called him to lead these people out of Egypt. And, as moms, we're commissioned in the same way to lead our children, to disciple our children, to show them what does it look like to have a relationship with God. And part of that is because of our modeling, our example that we're giving them. And then a lot of it too is that we're pointing them back to God's word. We're showing them what truth is and teaching them how to navigate their own, life and make decisions that are based on, godly decisions and choices. And Moses was doing that same thing for the people of Israel. But then we see also in Exodus a time when Moses needed to be built up. And so my other question that I'm asking this morning is, how are you being built up, and how are you building others up? Because as moms, we're always storing up. We're pouring out into our children, but then a lot of times we're pouring out of empty cups, and we're not creating space to allow us to be built up, allow someone to pour into us, or maybe to pour into somebody else that needs to be poured into. So in the book of Exodus, we read a time when the Israelites were in the desert and they were being attacked by the Amalekite army. Moses told Joshua to go and lead an army to fight them. And then Moses, Aaron, and a man named Hur, I like to make sure I say man named Hur because it just sounds funny when saying Hur, they went up on a hill, and Moses would hold up his staff. And as long as he was holding the staff up, the Israelites were winning down below. But then as Moses' arms grew tired and the staff would lower, the Israelites would start to lose. And so we see this beautiful picture of Aaron and Hur coming alongside Moses and helping him hold his arms up. So God was the only one. God commissioned Moses alone to lead these people, but he said, I'm not going to leave you all alone. He's going to send some people that are going to come alongside you when you feel weak. And that's exactly how it is with us as moms. We are the primary people that are going to disciple and lead our children. We're the primary ones that are going to be storing them up. And at the same time, though, God says, but you don't have to be alone. I'm going to give you community. I want you to be surrounded by people that are going to love you and encourage you, build you up in your faith, and meet you right where you are so that they can relate to you. You guys can relate to one another in what you're going through, so that when you become spiritually weak, you can be lifted up. Or when your friend becomes spiritually weak, you can be that Aaron or Hur and help them hold up their staff. Romans 1:11 through 12 says, I long to see you, that I may impart to you some spiritual gift to make you strong. That is, that you and I may be mutually encouraged by each other's faith. Mutually encouraged. And so in other words, we're building one another up. I kind of talked a little bit in the beginning about how God gave me this verse for women's ministry. It's 2 Peter 3:18. And so I kind of wanted to go back to that a little bit, and I wanted to talk about how is that going to relate to this new ministry in Moms Connect. So the two words that I really like to focus on is grow and glory. Those are the two words that I feel like God really just kind of put out there in bold emphasis when he gave me that verse. And I know it's his heart and his desire for us to grow in community with one another as we're also growing in our closeness and our relationship with him. And then in all we do, it's always for God's glory. And that's really truly not just the heartbeat of women's ministry. I think that's the whole heartbeat of Grace Church. It's the whole heartbeat of the church as a whole, like Big C Church, all of the churches, all of the body of Christ. That is exactly what we were designed to do. And so when we talk about Moms Connect, this is really the heart. And I love that our logo even has the heart, like in the word Moms Connect, because I really want to see us grow in community with one another, grow in our relationship with the Lord. So today, you're going to have some time to just be together at your tables, to have some time to talk and discuss and connect. And then if you're saying, I really resonate with wanting to be able to be a part of a community. I would love for you then to dig in a little bit deeper, become part of a small group, try it out for a little bit. Or if you're saying, you know what, I think maybe God might be commissioning me to lead and be the leader to build up other women in a group, I'd love to talk to you about that too. But I know that we're going to have a little bit of Q&A time and things. So I'm hoping, though, that this morning you just got a sense of my heart, got a sense for, I believe, God's vision for women's ministry, God's vision, the purpose for Moms Connect. And I hope that something resonated with you this morning. Whatever season of life as a mom that you're in, we always have opportunities to store up and to build up. Thank you.
Okay, ladies, I'm going to pass the mic over to Joanna. So if you have any questions, just raise your hand.
All right, who's got a question?
Yes.
How old are your kids?
So my stepson is 20. My daughter is 11, almost 12, and then my son's going to be turning 10 in a couple weeks.
Okay, I saw your hand first, then Maureen, I'll come back.
So this isn't a question so much as when you were talking about taking off the shoes, because the first thing you said, it was in the form of a question, right? What do we do? And the first thing I thought was fall across the threshold, make it home, and say, thank God we made it. But then you take your shoes after that. When you said that you're on holy ground, something really touched me, and I remembered a verse that I had read a couple of weeks ago. So I went and looked it up, which it's KJV, so pardon me for that. But it's talking about children being holy. So it's 1 Corinthians 7:14, and it says, for the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Else were your children unclean, but now they are holy. And it just reminds me of the grace of God, that even if there's one mom and there's someone here who's an anchor, your children are holy because you know God in an intimate way, and I just thought that was a really cool connection. So.
That's awesome.
That's great.
I'm a great-grandma, and I don't mean that I'm a great-grandma. But anyway, I'm just wanting to say that I would love to be a part of a group of grandmas who are involved with their grandkids and great-grandkids. And because that's a different journey, because you have parents to deal with. So I would appreciate any of you grandmas and great-grandmas to come and connect with me to see if we can get something going.
Awesome. Yeah.
Super. Someone else. Susan.
Hi, this is Susan Kelly, and what I learned about with Jen is 1, 2, 3 task, another task. I've completed that task, so we'll move on to the next task. Well, what I found is that man, he creates what we want to do. Man really knows, but you know what God does? God disposes, just to throw us off. So, man proposes, God disposes.
I know, like the word says that, a man will plan, but the Lord determines his steps. So,
Lisi's got a question. Okay, so my question is, how did you end up at Grace?
okay, long story to that chapter.
I'll sit down for this
I know
one.
somebody was like, oh, I can't wait to hear testimony. I said, well, it's kind of more like a chapter because I feel like there's so many different stories that God gives us. So that was, the reason why I love this story so much is because I really feel like when I talked about how God was changing the treasure of my heart, he was really just showing me what walking in obedience looked like. And I think it was from that moment, it was a 7-year journey of just small steps of obedience. Like, okay, go here, go here. That Moms in Prayer group, I led that group the next year. And that was one of the nudges. And it was like, okay, I'm going to prompt you now to go here and go do this and now do this. And I just kept saying, yes, 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 Lord. And it was 2019. So it was before COVID and everything. I felt like I was just doing dishes at the sink. And that's kind of me and God's time together. And my kids know very much, like, leave mom alone, she's doing the dishes and stuff. And I remember I'm just washing the dishes, and I was listening to Chip Ingram, who was talking about, he had this message on holy ambition. And I'm listening to it, and then there was like this little preview for Moody Bible School, and God was just like, I want you to go back to school. And I was like, literally like, what? You know? And I'm like, back to nursing school? Am I going to nursing school? And I'm listening for this plug for Moody, and it was like very clear to me. It's like, I want you to go back to Bible. I want you to go to Bible school. And I'm like, okay, what's that about? You know, because like what do you mean go back to Bible? Like, for what? What am I doing? You know? And I just felt like it was really clear that he was telling me to do that. And so I just started taking classes at Moody online and graduated. It was actually a little bit after I started, working here, but it was after I started going to Moody, I just was slowly feeling like this call towards ministry. And I had no idea what ministry it was. My heart was women's ministry, but I was like, but God, wherever you would have me, that's, and whenever I talked to several people who I just said, I think God might be calling me to ministry, and several people confirmed, you should look into women's ministry. And so Joyce Meekins, the director here at the time, I went up to her and I said, so I don't have any idea what the plan is, but I just feel like God wants me to step into women's ministry. I don't know what that looks like, but would you just be willing to mentor me? And I had no idea that at the same time that I'm approaching her with this, she was feeling like God was getting ready to ask her to step down and step away. She had been praying like, God, just send me someone, that I could pass the reins off to, And so her and I began like an 8-month mentoring journey together. And then she said, she goes, that day that you asked me to mentor you into women's ministry, God already told me that you were going to be the next person after me. And I still had to go through the whole process of things, and I still had to interview, they interviewed, other people and things too and stuff, but I knew God wanted me here because he had led me, just like he always did, so all those small stepping stones, and here I am, so.
That's a great story. So I have a question, and we'll take a few more questions, I think. You mentioned 2 books, The Measure of a Woman and A Woman After God's Own Heart.
A Mom,
Which,
yeah.
Oh, A Mom.
Yeah.
I can't even read my writing. I thought I wrote A Man After God's Own Heart. I thought, no, that can't be right. So sorry. Okay, I'm here. Wow, look at that. What book would you recommend I and we start? Not that one's better than the other, but what would you say, oh, check that one out, or go to the audiobook, Overdrive, which I love audiobooks. What would you start with?
Risen Motherhood.
Oh, wait. Oh, you didn't mention that before.
I know. I didn't mention that. Well, I didn't mention that in talk. It wasn't a book that I read in that season. It's a recent book. It's a newer book.
Risen Motherhood.
Risen Motherhood.
Who
And
wrote that?
They have a podcast too. Oh my goodness. I think like Laura
Okay.
Whiffler, I want to say, is one of the names, and then there's another one too.
Okay, perfect. Sounds great.
Excellent book, excellent podcast. And they have they have like something too where the grandparents visit a lot of times on the podcast, and they give the grandparent perspective too. So it's a really good podcast.
Well, thank you. I'm going to write that down, and hopefully I can read my writing. Anyone else with a question?